that through them your will may be done for this nation, to the honor and glory of your name, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Let's say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is now in session. Minutes for the meeting held on Monday, March 15, 2021, and Friday, April 23, 2021, to be confirmed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, May 4th, 2021, to be deferred.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General. Petitions, papers.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I'm commanded to lay the proceeds and instrumentalities of crime, value of seizable listed assets, Order 2021.
Government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 1, in the name of the Honorable Minister of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, to move the second reading of the Liquor Licenses Bill 2021.
Honorable Member for St. James Central.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I come to your house this morning to pilot what really is a piece of legislation that at first blush takes on the appearance of a business facilitation initiative on the part of the government of Barbados. But, sir, it is really much larger than that. And therefore, sir, I come to your house to have a conversation with you on the matter of economic and social justice in Barbados. I begin, Mr. Speaker, sir, by trying to share with you a little bit of context around that which brings us here today. These files that I have before me, sir, reflect the difficulty that has been confronted or had been confronted by successive administrations surrounding this matter of the management and administration of liquor licenses in Barbados. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it has been a bedeviling exercise, bedeviling successive administrations in this country. And in fact, the records of the file, I've read the file cover to cover, the records of the files, plural rather, take us as far back as the year 1991, where it was first mooted that there needs to have been some attention paid to a reassessment of the way in which we deal with this business of managing liquor licenses, administrating the issuance of liquor licenses in Barbados. What perhaps never happened before this current administration, of which we are a part, sir, is that there had never been the robust and unswerving commitment to deconstruct the existing legislation and then to reconstruct it in a way that allowed for us to have the kind of delivery that we want to be able to give to the people of Barbados by this legislation today. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, we come here to deconstruct and to reconstruct the administration of liquor licenses in Barbados and the system surrounding that. And at the very outset, sir, I feel it would be incumbent on me, thank you, it would be incumbent on me to begin by acknowledging the contribution made in the preparation of this piece of legislation by my colleague, the member for St. George South, who would have assumed the responsibility for the Ministry of Commerce immediately after the last general election, sir, and obviously who would have had to lay the foundation for that which we now deliver today. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, this legislation, if I could begin, and if I could ask you to allow me to broaden the context, allows us to have a framework within which there are three themes that the government is striking. The first, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that of the ease of doing business and the facilitation of business in Barbados. I need not tell you, sir, because you have sat in this chair now for 2.5 years, that this government, unlike many governments in the history of this country, is completely and irrevocably, unswervingly dedicated, Mr. Speaker, sir, to the ease of doing business in this country. The record, sir, is almost second to none in the space of 2.5 short years. No sooner, sir, had we taken our positions in Parliament after the last election, we were within a few weeks having the discussion with this country on a new town planning piece of legislation, and certainly within 6 months that was a reality in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, sir. I myself have had the privilege of coming here, sir, and moving this Parliament to support me and to support the government of Barbados as we place no less than $6.5 million at the disposal of micro enterprises in Barbados in our effort to deal with the unprecedented challenges and difficulties arising out of the COVID environment in this country. And search as you may, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I was invited to do so as recently as last night by the head of government, I cannot find a program of similar commitment in the Eastern Caribbean. I say that again. I cannot find, Mr. Speaker, sir, a program of similar commitment to easing the pain and plight of micro enterprises in the Eastern Caribbean. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, beyond that, we know that this government has committed itself to rectify 20 years of neglect with regard to the pain felt by fisher folk in this country. Those fishermen who have to fender their boats, sir, have to have jetties that are in a state of good repair. Mr. Speaker, sir, all of that is part of the demonstration of this government towards the facilitation of business in Barbados. And you know, part of the difficulty that we face is that we recall, and certainly I recall, sir, speaking to this theme while I was in opposition. And at that time, obviously, Parliament met at a different location. But, sir, You know, business facilitation in Barbados at one point used to be seen in the light of how we can help a multi-million-dollar deep-pocketed investor who is looking to get a permission through town planning, or who is seeking, Mr. Speaker, sir, to get immigration department to facilitate him, or Mr. Speaker, sir, who is looking at some other way of assisting his business. What we did not have a discussion on is how we facilitate business enterprises, not only at that large level, but as they come right down the line, the smaller business, the medium-sized businesses, the smaller businesses, the micro business, because all business in Barbados, sir, must be treated in an even-handed way and must be given the opportunity to benefit from the facilitative efforts and endeavors of the state. And Mr. Speaker, sir, this matter of the liquor licenses administration in this country, as I said, has bedeviled successive administrations. And it has bedeviled these administrations, Mr. Speaker, sir, because I said before, there was a need to deconstruct and reconstruct the legislation. But beyond that, there was a need to hearken to the concerns being raised by many stakeholders, and again, at all levels of Barbadian economy and society. Consumer protection body, Mr. Speaker, sir, the consumer protection body in Barbados wrote into the Ministry of Commerce years ago expressing its concern. The Small Business Association of Barbados, sir, written into the Ministry of Commerce expressing their views and their concern. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association expressing their concern and frustration. Mr. Speaker, sir, the Chamber of Commerce of Barbados at all levels. And why? Because the issue of how we deal with liquor licenses, sir, touches almost every level of the ladder, so to speak, of the business enterprises in Barbados. From the large ones, sir, like the hotels and restaurants, and then, Mr. Speaker, sir, to the very micro people, those people who, for the benefit of those members who come from the parish of Christchurch, sir, those persons who are operating Oystins Bay Gardens every Friday and Saturday night. And Mr. Speaker, the failure of us as a parliament to be able to bring this difficult situation to a conclusion, a satisfactory conclusion, does not reflect well upon this House. So I'm pleased today, sir, to be in a position that we can take this measure and advance this process that really has been the humbug of the people of Barbados for nigh 30 years. Mr. Speaker, sir, the second broad thematic theme that I want to strike, sir, is the question of the need for us to advance legislative reform in this country. Now, it is a matter which is worthy of some significant discussion. You would have seen it several times, sir, because you practice in the courts of Barbados. But we have to recognize that we don't treat to one another very well in this country in terms of the legislative and justice system that we have. And therefore, we have to speak the language of reform at some point. And what are the reforms, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we're speaking to? A need exists, I think, for us to redirect the focus of the legal and justice system away from the colonial approaches of justice, and that justice system, to recognize that the justice system that we inherited, and certainly that this administration inherited, sir, 2.5 years ago, was sullied. It was sullied, Mr. Speaker, sir, by an excessive focus on incarceration. That is not to speak ill of the courts of Barbados. That's to speak ill of the law. That's to say that the law needs reform. It is not to speak ill of a judicial officer at any level, be he magistrate or be he judge or be he justice of appeal. It is, Mr. Speaker, sir, to reflect on what you and I know because we've had to plead at the bar, and that the law of this land has an excessive focus on locking up people, and locking up, Mr. Speaker, sir, the sons primarily and the daughters of working class people, because unfortunately there is also an economic linkage between that which takes place, sir, and the law, and that which takes place in the society. Now the reality is, Mr. Speaker, sir, The children of underprivileged people have to be dealt a decent hand in this country. The ugly history we know well. I don't have to delay the house, sir. We had the discussion nationally a few weeks ago. A child may leave home because the circumstances of the household are oppressive. Somebody interfering with that child. Somebody abusing that child. That child runs away and gets locked up because it is wandering. We had to do away with that. Mr. Speaker, sir, we know, and you know, because you have practiced in this land. You know, Mr. Speaker, sir, the wrenching agony of the victimless crimes and the way in which people get a jail sentence when they had 2 spliffs. This legislation that we seek to correct today, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we will repeal and replace, is one which allows for people to be incarcerated because you had a man who was drunk in your shop. Can you imagine that, sir? Or it allows for you to be incarcerated because you were drunk in the street or in the shop, Mr. Speaker, sir. And that's the reality, not of the economically better off, but it is the reality on a daily basis of those who do not have social reach in this country to lift a receiver and say, man, help me, help my child, help my nephew, help whoever. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the sons and daughters of working class Barbados have to be dealt a decent hand. And as I reflect on this matter, sir, those were the early things that were treated to when the member for St. George South would have been trying to pull together the initial meetings to get this legislation up and running, Mr. Speaker, sir, because these were the things that had humbugged us philosophically while we were in opposition, as you will recall, and these are the things that we campaigned against. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I need not remind you of the paradox. First of all, the anesthetized language and the sterile superficiality which surrounds, Mr. Speaker, white-collar crime, which surrounds matters of corruption, the so-called gentlemen's offenses, Mr. Speaker, the anesthetized language with which we speak to them, the superficiality, sterile as it is, with which we have historically treated to those offenses. Meanwhile, a little black boy, Mr. Speaker, sir, Ruby's little black boy, somewhere in the Ivy, would be arrested for some trivial offense and locked up. And there has to be an even-handed approach to the justice system. It has to work for all, Mr. Speaker, sir, and a necessary criminalization of Barbadian people, especially Barbadian working class people, must come to an end. And that, Mr. Speaker, brings me to the third broad thematic point that this legislation allows this government to tackle. And that, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the use of technology to improve the quality and speed of delivery of high-demand services in this country. There is no doubt that there are some services in Barbados which are in high demand, and upon which the people of this country rely on a government to facilitate them with and to be responsive to them too, because they need to deliver, they need to access these services in order to deliver the commercial effort, the commercial enterprise that they're involved in. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we must not bury our light under a bushel. You know, all too often, we sit here and we endure the abuse. We endure the very unfortunate comments that come from some quarters. The leader of the opposition distinguishes himself, sir, as a man who, unprovoked, would stand in the House of Assembly and say that this government is a dictatorship. I heard that with my own ears a few weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, and that is not to reflect on that debate. It is I recall the statement coming from his lips. And you know, sir, I say to myself,
Point of order, I think the honourable member is misleading the House. And I would adjure you that you ask of him that he would retract that statement that I stood on my feet in here and called this government a dictatorship unless he can provide the proof that I so did. And if he does not withdraw it, I will have to ask that the record be brought here to show that I said that in here. So we have to take it back this time. Young.
Mr. Speaker, sir, let us not detain the House. If it would please the honourable member, I will withdraw the statement. I know, and the honourable member knows, that he used the language dictatorship with a view to reflecting, perhaps he's right, not on the government as a whole, but on the leader of the government. But you're going to disagree with that too?
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Leader of Opposition.
I will absolutely have to ask of you, kindly, to have the honourable member, St. James Central, withdraw those remarks. I did not say on my feet in here that the government was a dictatorship or that the leader of the government was a dictator. Now, if he wants to debate that, we can, but I have not said that in here. Unless he can prove that, I would have to have that withdrawn unequivocally.
And I am in a very indulgent mood today, Mr. Speaker, sir, and I will withdraw that too. But what I will never shy away from is that the leader of the opposition used the term dictator in here. And I will say to the leader of the opposition, Mr. Speaker, sir, through you, that, I believe that unfortunately he's starting to cast himself in the light of an ingrate. Because one cannot reflect on the administration of this country in any way, shape, or form and collide with the language of dictatorship or dictators, and at the same time be the beneficiary, as the leader of the opposition is, Mr. Speaker, sir. He is the beneficiary of circumstances in which his constituents can renew, because of this government and its commitment to the people that he represents, renew their driver's licenses online without having to present themselves, Mr. Speaker, sir, at a civic center in order to do so. On what do you raise?
A point of order, Mr. Speaker. And I address you, and not that honourable member who just sat. And a point of order, he's misleading the House again. It cannot be in a proper parliamentary spirit, or it cannot be executed in any sense of decency or propriety that he seems to suggest. In fact, not seems to suggest, he stated categorically. I cast myself in the style of an ingrate because government provides services to the people of Barbados and St. Michael West. That is totally out of order, Mr. Speaker. I await your ruling.
As a what?
Ingrate.
Sir, I thought I had a right to have an opinion in this place.
Mr. Speaker, I'm awaiting your ruling here.
Sorry, beg your pardon.
The point of order, honourable member, is that it is
He is
unparliamentary?
misleading- It is. He is
Unparliamentary or
he is
misleading? the House?
Both, Mr. Speaker.
Can you
Both.
expand, sir?
It is unparliamentary.
Right.
It is also untrue and misleading. And for a minister in today's government to suggest that for the government to provide services for any citizen of Barbados and that one stands to represent the interests of those people suggests that one styles himself in that manner, that is totally misleading. He should withdraw it, Mr. Speaker. Else we can carry it further if you want. But we might be here all day.
Honourable member, based on the vocabulary definition, that is in truth and in fact unparliamentary, and it is suggestive that person that
It's also untrue.
and that the person is ungrateful and insulting. I would ask you to thereby withdraw those remarks, honourable member.
Mr. Speaker, sir, if that is your ruling, then I
Yes,
stand by
yes.
it, and I withdraw unreservedly, Mr. Speaker, sir. But let the record reflect, sir, that the honourable leader of the opposition is enriched by virtue of the fact that he sits in a parliament, as he now does, with a government that has prioritized the well-being of his constituents, whether he has recognized that or not, sir. And let the record reflect, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the honourable member is even doubly enriched, not only by virtue of the fact that this parliament has made sure that they facilitate the ease of his constituents in terms of accessing driver's licenses, and therefore, sir, they don't have to leave their place of business to go and physically appear at a civic center to get those licenses renewed, sir, where that has never been done before in the history of Barbados prior to this administration that someone at some stage called the dictatorship. But let the record reflect, sir, that the leader of the opposition is enriched by virtue of the fact that he and his constituents can apply also online for passports if they want to travel. And for a minor fee of $15, sir, have that passport delivered to their residences. And again, sir, an initiative of this administration, led, I believe, by the member for St. James North and by the member for Christchurch East. And again, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Honorable Leader of Government Business, Honorable Leader of Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I have to raise a point of order again. I still think the Honorable Member St. James is misleading the House. Repeatedly used the term that the Honorable Member, Leader of the Opposition, is enriched by his role as representative of the people of St. Michael West. I am in no way enriched as used in the context of this debate. If the Honorable Member of St. James Central is enriched to any extent and in any degree by the opportunity of representing the people of St. James Central or by the performance of his position as Minister of Energy and Small Business and whatever, this Honorable Member over here is not enriched. I may be edified, I may be uplifted, I may be satisfied at doing my duty to the extent that I'm able, but certainly not enriched as Barbadians understand the use of that term, as is used in this thing. I know we're talking about rum and liquor licenses. It seems to me the Honorable St. James may have imbibed a little before he came here today. I don't have a problem with that. Let him object.
But Honorable Member, the term enrich does not necessarily mean monetarily. So the mere fact that you are being referred to as being enriched might be spiritually, emotionally, etc. So one cannot therefore attribute the term enrich in a narrow sense, but can utilize a broad perspective as the term enrich can mean, sir.
And I thank you. I'm in full agreement with that, Mr. Speaker, and I'm simply trying to underscore the fact that I have not been rich monetarily.
Right.
If that's the case at St. James, it's not the case in St. Michael.
Yeah, but I remember he has not said that.
And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker...
And one cannot therefore infer, Honorable, let me speak. One cannot therefore infer, because the Honorable Member used the term enrich, that it means enrich as it relates to money, etc. As I said, it ought to be given, or it can be given a very, very broad perspective, sir.
And sir, I'm simply saying I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I'm saying that my interpretation of his use of the term in this particular context had to do with some monetary value. And I'm saying for the record, and quite clearly, I have not been so enriched by my duties to the people of St. Michael West. If that applies at St. James, it does not apply down to St. Michael West or Central, I'm sure.
Continue, Honorable Member.
Mr. Speaker, sir, as I listen to the Leader of the Opposition, I'm reminded of Shakespeare's observance that, he says, sir, methinks the lady doth protest too much. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am grateful to the Leader of the Opposition for a chance to reflect even further. Because the benefits, sir, the benefits to a parliamentary representative, spiritually, as you put it, Mr. Speaker, sir, must also include the fact that in the constituency of the Leader of the Opposition, because of this government, and that is what he wants to run away from, because of this government that he himself ran away from, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are able now to see his constituents, because of this government, benefit from an opportunity to get police certificates of character online, thereby facilitating their own business efforts and opportunities for employment, Mr. Speaker, sir. And we could go on and on and on, because what it really has been about is an Every single step of the way for the last 2.5 years, this government, sir, has been committing and recommitting itself to a thrust in an unprecedented way in Barbados in terms of making business less static, in terms of making the business environment, employment, and opportunities for work less unpredictable, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is a thrust which is rooted in development and transformation, a commitment to transformation in this society and economy, sir. And we campaign on that, all of us in this house. All, bar none. Bar none. And the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, sir, perhaps foreshadows what my concern is, because, sir, he, sir, would well recall sharing the platforms. Well, you see, he's getting agitated, and so should he be. Were he, I would be agitated too. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, he recalls well when we would have gone to the public to ask them for their confidence, and prior to receiving it, sir, we would have committed that we would ask ourselves a few key questions in this business of government, if given the chance. The first would be, sir, what would be the public interest that we would be seeking to protect? And in this case, it is ease of doing business in Barbados and correcting certain social and economic ills, Mr. Speaker. We also said to the public that we would ask ourselves, what is the mischief that we would be seeking to correct? And I'm going to come to that mischief too, because what we have sought to do by this piece of legislation is for the first time in Barbados' history, post-colonial history, to protect the young people of this country insofar as access to drinking alcohol and consumption of intoxicating liquor is concerned. I'm going to come to that. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we asked ourselves, we committed to the public to ask ourselves whether digitization can be of assistance in this regard. And the legislation clearly demonstrates that, because we are moving this whole process online. But even most important, sir, Mr. Speaker, sir, are there any special interests that we need to look after? And I want to speak to that question of the special interests, because the young people of Barbados are near and dear to the hearts, I hope, of all of us in this house. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, there are three broad purposes of this bill, as I said. The first, therefore, is to be the administration of and decriminalization of stakeholders under the existing legislation, and to shift the responsibility for liquor licenses from the Magistrates Court, Mr. Speaker, sir, which we are doing by this legislation, and to create a new civic structure for administrating liquor licenses. We are going to take it, sir, from the burdensome and oppressive, long frustrating and long delayed approach used in the Magistrates Courts of Barbados under the supervision of the Royal Barbados Police Force, sir, and we are going to create a civic administrative structure in which the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs will be the administrative entity for handling liquor licenses in this country. The aim, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I have said, is to better facilitate business in Barbados. And I recall that liquor licenses, sir, regulate the sale and the consumption of intoxicating beverage in this country. They are an important part of commerce at all levels in this country, Mr. Speaker, sir. And I have outlined already the fact that whether you're talking about a shop and a bar, you're talking about a snackette, you're talking about an event promoter or event producer, sir, you're talking about a hotel, and even the wholesalers and exporters, they, sir, must have licenses to do that which they do. So it is a critical component to industry in this country. But the third purpose, and those vulnerable categories that we must protect, and that we do not shy away from protecting, Mr. Speaker, sir, is the young people of Barbados. And the third purpose of this bill is to correct a mischief, sir, well, not just one mischief, but a trilogy of mischiefs that have long humbugged serious onlookers in Barbadian society. Clause 27 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, sir, treats to the appropriately and definitively to the sale and the supply of liquor, intoxicating beverages to our minors. Now, I referred, sir, to a trilogy of mischiefs. The old legislation did not deal adequately, in our view, with the sale of intoxicating liquor to minors. Nor, Mr. Speaker, did it deal adequately, in our view, with the issue of aiding and assisting a minor in obtaining or consuming intoxicating alcohol. And then the third part of the trilogy of mischief, sir, is employing minors who are going to be involved in the business of sale of alcohol. And under the old legislation, what we seek to repeal today, at age 16, you could do all of them things. You could get a drink, go and buy it and walk out with it. You could, Mr. Speaker, sir, be in a rum shop and a youngster come in and you help him to get the alcohol. And equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, you could employ him in the process of a business which is engaging in sale and consumption of intoxicating beverages. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, under this new legislation, let me make it clear, either of those three types of behavior will result in the person who commits them being exposed to either a fine of up to $10,000 or to a term of imprisonment for up to 5 years, or, Mr. Speaker, sir, to both. I have already said that the new legislation does not contemplate the constant criminalizing of people. So this piece of legislation, sir, will stand alone, but consequential on its passage, if it passes this House and passes the other place. Consequential upon that, Mr. Speaker, sir, will come about certain implications for the Minor Offences Act. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to make sure that there's absolute clarity on this matter. The Minor Offences Act, Chapter 137 of the Laws of Barbados, will be amended by inserting new sections after Section 3, or at Section 3, rather. So the offenses relating to the sale and consumption of liquor will be inserted with respect to a person who sells or supplies liquor to a minor, with respect to a person who aids a minor in obtaining or consuming liquor, and with respect to employing a minor in connection with the sale or supply of liquor. And Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said, those are the parts of the Act that will cause a person who is guilty of an offense under that section to be liable on summary conviction to a fine of $10,000 or to imprisonment for 5 years or to both. And of course, Mr. Speaker, sir, it shall be a defense. It shall be a defense to any charge brought in that nature for the person charged to be able to prove that he had reasonable grounds for believing that the minor was at 18 years of age or older. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are, by this act, resetting the legal age for consuming intoxicating beverages in Barbados from age 16, where it now stands, to age 18, where it shall be. I want the House to remember, Mr. Speaker, sir, that under the existing legislation at Section 70C, subsection 6, the sale of intoxicating alcohol consumed on the licensed premises to any person under age 16 was the offense. So that now we go to age 18. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, why do we do this? We do this, sir, because, again, once you go through what the people who call themselves interest groups in Barbados, who call themselves stakeholders in Barbados, who call themselves part of our society with a social conscience, the child advocates, etc., sir, the National Council of Substance Abuse, the insurance industry in Barbados, who raise the real commercial concerns, sir, about the frequency of accidents on the road and how between age 16 and age 20, a little bit, they are far, far higher than the age that you are at, Mr. Speaker, sir. And indeed, because the leader of the opposition don't want me to talk about him anymore. He's up in his feelings right now, sir. So he ain't want his name called. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, these are people who have long written in to the ministry, long expressed their concerns about the way in which the administration of liquor in this country, intoxicating beverages in this country has been conducted. And in their concern, sir, it is abundantly clear that there is a desire in the best interest of our young people to have the age raised. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I think in raising the age, we also become consistent with a number of the international parts of the international community. But more importantly, we are being true to the very clear challenges which are faced in Barbadian society, because we do know that there have been challenges with our young people being able to access not only intoxicating beverages, but I believe it is true to say access other substances which are injurious to their health and development. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I come to the other aspect of this debate, which is very important. We are in the third decade of the 21st century. And I said to my colleagues in the parliamentary group that we cannot continue to relate to business in the way in which we related to it, Mr. Speaker, sir, when we were a colonial backwater. We cannot. This legislation that we seek to repeal today is 64 years old. It was passed in colonial times in 1957, Mr. Speaker, sir. It is in every way, shape, and form part of the legislative colonial construct. In every way, Mr. Speaker, sir, it reflects the thinking of that age. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, the architecture is aimed at repression. It is aimed at suppression. I would even go so far as to say, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a legislative architecture that facilitates oppression. But I do not think, Mr. Speaker, sir, that it in any way serves our interest in facilitating the expansion and the growth of enterprises which are allied to and aligned with the usage of intoxicating beverages. And that is something that we have to correct. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the colonial thinkers would have, as I said, structured a piece of legislation which we have labored under, no doubt to the detriment of a number of our constituents through the years, through the 60 long years, Mr. Speaker, sir. And as you study the legislation, it is pretty obvious to see that it is, as I have indicated before, rooted in class discrimination in Barbados. It is, Mr. Speaker, sir, it reflects the philosophical intent of the old colonial overlords. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is a thought process which does not work well for uplifting the underprivileged people in this society. I want to reject that approach to governance, sir. And I want to reject that approach because this government takes the view, and we campaigned in the last election, we campaigned on the theme that we would take the view that where there was reputable commercial activity in Barbados that was being frustrated, that we would remove those obstacles to that would be so as to create an empowering impulse for the people that we want to represent, Mr. Speaker, sir. That we would remove the obstacles that frustrate them, the obstacles that inhibit their investment, the obstacles, Mr. Speaker, sir, that make it harder for them to be entrepreneurial and to have self-employment. You cannot stand here and make idle comment about the need for entrepreneurship on one hand, and then, Mr. Speaker, sir, maintain a legislative architecture which frustrates the very same entrepreneurship that you want to develop. And we see, Mr. Speaker, sir, the business, for example, of shopkeeping, or operating a kiosk in Oyster Bay Garden, or if Patsy down by Holders Hill wants to sell a few bottles of Johnny Walker Black. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, she is doing that by way of entrepreneurship. And, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is, in fact, historically one of the original outlets and opportunities for black business in Barbados to develop. And if you study the legislation, sir, you understand not only the context in which the old legislation was created, but you understand why it was created the way in which it was created. Because, sir, there was a reluctance in the Parliament of Barbados. Let us be frank. It is not the first time I've had to speak in this House in these tones and in these terms. It is the Parliament of Barbados in 1957 that did not want any independence from the shackles of the plantation, did not want any independence from plantocratic patronage, did not want, Mr. Speaker, sir, there to be alternatives to the grim reality of labor in the city of Bridgetown, experienced by working class black people, sir, and therefore that Parliament made sure that this emerging business of small people starting their own enterprises and selling intoxicating beverages was humbugged and was stifled and was frustrated. That was what this Parliament did. And it is only meet, fitting, and proper, sir, that in this 21st century, we undo those mischiefs of the past. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, for what do I mean? Because I want to be fair to the House and to those within earshot of my voice, both in cathedra and ex-cathedra outside the House of Assembly. Permit me, if I could, sir, to give you a snapshot of what we are talking about. It is difficult, sir, sometimes to, in fact, it's almost unimaginable at times, sir, especially for today's teenagers and today's young people, to understand the language, sir, understand the circumstances of the time of the Moyne Commission in the 1930s. They look at life, sir, through a different lens. They see with their eyes a different set of sensibilities, sir, than what would have existed nearly 100 years ago. But the fact of the matter is, sir, that when we're dealing with a piece of legislation such as this, that itself carries a certain antiquity and is rooted in considerations that began before 1964, it is important to grasp what the socio-economic circumstances were that led to the legislation that we got to correct. Because to understand why we have to do what we have to do today, sir, and why we want even the leader of the opposition to support us in this quest, in this journey, sir, is because to get there is to understand, first of all, why it is necessary for us to have the change. And a snapshot, sir, of the year 1957 is perhaps not adequate unless you connect it, sir, to what the circumstances were that existed a little bit prior to 1957. Because remember, sir, in the 1930s, we had what the English euphemistically called the disturbances in the West Indies. We called them what they were, sir, riots. And after that, Mr. Speaker, sir, World War II started, 39 to 45. So you got riots, immediately followed by the World War. And then you have the post-war reality, Mr. Speaker, sir. And if you go back to what the Moyne Commission and indeed the other, because, you know, there were two commissions, and as we often do in Barbados, sir, we have paid great homage to Lord Moyne, who came down from England. We forget that in the constituency of St. George, at that time, it was just St. George, there was a man whose name was Dean, George Campbell Dean, Barbadian born, went on to become Chief Justice of the Gold Coast, sir, of Africa. And he, sir, led a commission as well before Lord Moyne came here. And his findings were identical to that which Moyne subsequently found. In fact, he may have gone a little bit further in penetrating and analyzing Barbadian society. But you know, Mr. Speaker, sir, when you read those commissions, when you read, for example, the comments of Sir Theodore Branca, a former member, I believe, for the constituency of St. Lucie, who made the point, sir, reflecting on 1937 and 38, sir, that cane hole diggers in Barbados were working for 9 cents per 100 holes, and that the average day was 400 holes, so therefore you work for 36 cents a day. And a forker, a term that we no longer use, but the Honorable Member for St. Philip West immortalized it in song. I don't want a fork to be nobody's forker. The Honorable Member for St. Michael West, sir, in a different incarnation, immortalized that in song. And Mr. Speaker, sir, a forker would have been working for 36 cents, sir, a day as well. And these people, sir, tied to a plantation system where they got to rent a little rabland on the side of the plantation. So you're perpetually in a state of dependence. They wanted to free themselves from that, sir, and develop their own commercial instinct. And if you weren't on the plantation, so you were working, the only other option was to find work in Bridgetown. Within a big lot of options. And when you were in Bridgetown, Mr. Speaker, sir, the commissions that did the analysis, you know, sir, I will never forget in Lord Moyne's inquiry talked about the bakers locking people in their bakeries from 5 p.m. until 10 the next morning. And the Swiss proprietor of the baker saying, well, he preferred that they stay in as late as 10 because it's too much trouble to get out of his bed to let out the people early on the morning. So you had people, sir, working for 16 hours and 18 hours, and in worst case scenario, according to the Dean Commission, 22 hours a day in some instances in Barbados. There was a natural instinct, therefore, sir, in circumstances where people in this country did not have any decency of pay, any decency, sir, circumstances of employment. All that is what gave birth to the work of the Workers' Union, Mr. Speaker, to try to bring some degree of decency to industrial climate in Barbados. The natural instinct was to get away from that if I could, and become self-employed if I could. And the original outlet, one of the original outlets besides vending, and we can come to vending in a couple of weeks, one of the original outlets, Mr. Speaker, sir, was this business of selling liquor from in a shop. And what then, sir, was the reply of the legislature? In this piece of legislation that we now treat to, the legislature in 1957, sir, in fact, before I go there, just so that nobody believes for a moment that the war, because it ended in 1945, things dramatically improved in Barbados by 1957. You know, if you go back and look at what the Barbados Workers' Union had to do in terms of industrial relations in this country, in 1955, they had to shut down this place for 12 days because of a problem on the waterfront with working conditions and pay. Unprecedented show of industrial strength, 1,153 workers on the waterfront of Barbados for 12 days, sir, 1955. In 1956, Mr. Speaker, sir, 246 workers at the Advocate. A strike led by the Workers' Union again, Barbados Workers' Union, wage increases being the issue. 11-day stoppage. Eventually emerged into 1,000 workers marching in Barbados, sir, and an embargo at the port of all goods other than food stuff. That's what the people of this country were enduring then, led by the Barbados Workers' Union. It is a matter, sir, of fate being kind to us that we have today in the Parliament of Barbados, the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers' Union. Also from St. George. So it ain't only that I'm talking about the work that the Dean Commission did, led by a son of the St. George soil, but we have a bill begun by a member for St. George and a Workers' Union leader from in St. George today as we correct the mischiefs, Mr. Speaker, sir. So let us not imagine for a moment that because the war finished in 1945, that those challenges facing this country had disappeared. And there was an impulse for the people in Barbados to emancipate themselves from those social and economic circumstances, those oppressive circumstances, and to be able to find self-employment. How then did this Parliament respond to that impulse? They responded, Mr. Speaker, with the Liquor Licenses Act that held shopkeepers liable to penalties of a criminal nature for permitting, and this is the language of the Act, sir, for permitting and suffering on their premises or suffering their premises to be used in circumstances where there was drunkenness. And you pay, sir, a fine of $2,500, or you are going to be imprisoned for 3 months. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, when people in the country are working for 36 cents a day, and when, Mr. Speaker, sir, the average age, according, sir, to the historians, the average wage in Barbados was $5.83 a week. How are you going to find $2,500, sir? The intention was cessation of business. The intention of the Parliament of Barbados was to shut down the business of the people, the working class people. who were upstarts, these people who forgot themselves and forgot their place, starting their own commercial enterprise, humbugging what was the established order in Barbados. They had to be repressed and suppressed and oppressed, Mr. Speaker, sir. Yes, those people who dared to rise. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that is the mischief that we come here to correct. It is rooted, sir, in legal formality, but it is enforced by huge criminal penalties, and it is fortified, Mr. Speaker, sir, by administrative frustration. Willful, in some cases, administrative frustration. And those hardships, Mr. Speaker, have been experienced across the general administrative structure of this liquor licensing system. I speak, sir, first of all, to the extensive bureaucracy and formality. You want a liquor license in Barbados? You have to apply in quadruplicate. 4. 1, Mr. Speaker, sir, going to the police. Another goes to public health. A third, environment. And then, Mr. Speaker, sir, once the police and the public health have no problem with you, Mr. Speaker, then you appear physically before the magistrate in the jurisdiction which you want to have the event or where your business is operated. Now, even the fact, and I need not tell you, sir, because you have practiced in this country. And for those of us, like my friend from Christchurch East, who have practiced in Barbados, we know well, because we've seen it firsthand, day after painful day, Mr. Speaker. After your formal appearances, and I can come back to the formal appearance itself, but after the formal appearance, you wait for 4 to 5 weeks in order to get your paperwork. So you can't be seriously talking about helping people to do business in 2021 when everything is real time. The things that we witnessed a gentleman jump up in here about and become agitated. Simple things like making sure a driver's license is accessible real time, that you can get a passport application online real time, that your certificate of character can be done online real time. What on earth could make any right-thinking human being rise up and get agitated and tremble, Mr. Speaker, sir, and ask for things to be withdrawn, blah, blah, blah? Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, there are some people still amongst us who have a mindset that is rooted in the old colonial architecture, the old colonial way of thinking, that black people, humble black people, must know their place, must keep their place. The rich man at his castle, the poor man at his gate. God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. I do not subscribe to the view, Mr. Speaker, sir, that because you are born into underprivileged circumstances, you cannot emancipate yourself or be assisted in the emancipation of yourself from those circumstances. And I say, Mr. Speaker, sir, that even worse than the wait for 5 weeks to get paperwork is the experience that we subject people to in the magistrates' courts of this country when it comes to liquor licenses. You know, so that if you go there today for your liquor license, and something happened that the magistrate, for example, may have taken ill, indeed, or they got Test cricket playing in Barbados. So the court...
You're speaking in certain courts,
yes, sir. Yes, sir. Not all, not across the board, but it has, and we know it has been known to happen. So that the court, if it meet, they meet for a very, very, very short time, or it might not meet at all. This is a reality of which I speak. And Mr. Speaker, sir, then what happens to the person who went there to deal with his or her business or her liquor license? Because he or she may want to have that license in place for when the Test cricket done and the one-day start. Yeah? And Mr. Speaker, sir, you got to come back. And you got to wait for a date to come back. And don't think your date is going to be tomorrow. Don't hold your breath and hope your date is next week, sir. Don't hope the date is a fortnight from now. Very often you're going to wait a while before you get back in there. That is how we conduct or have conducted the people's business since the year 1957 in this country. It has to change. Equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, the court appearance requires a wait because you go there and you are part of a crowd. Indeed, sir, you may be part of a crowd that on average, and these files, sir, reflect study done, Mr. Speaker, sir, on average between 65 and 85 people a day in a court waiting for a liquor license. And they're standing, sir, not seated like how we are inside here in the air-conditioned room, stand up outside in the sun or in the rain, waiting on their turn for some police officer to come to the doorstep. Arthur Holder, Arthur Holder, Arthur Holder. And then, sir, your turn comes in and you do what you have to do. And there have been times, sir, when the line is as long as over 100 people, which tells you that in all likelihood, you may God come back another day because you might not get through today. That's what we were subjecting people and have been subjecting them to, sir, since 1957. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the grim reality of that is that when we came to government, 2 months after we came to government, actually, the figures for Whole Town Magistrates Court in my constituency, in terms of liquor licenses that were waiting to be processed, was that there were 1,000 licenses waiting to be processed. 1,000 in Whole Town. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I must tell you now, as a parliamentary representative for the parish of St. James, as a parliamentary representative for people who had to go to Whole Town to get their licenses, sir, it is a disgrace. It is a disgrace. And it has to be, sir, a frustration and a humbug to ordinary Barbadians doing their ordinary course of business. To say to me that I go wait in a line for 1,000 people in a process like that I just described, which demonstrates absolutely no capacity to accelerate and make sure that I'm able to do the business that I'm trying to do. And these are the things, sir, that we have been correcting. I don't expect that somebody who's taken it as their vested interest to criticize or stand in opposition to the government of Barbados to praise us for these things. But I do expect, sir, that the people of Barbados will understand the substantial transformation and the positive efforts made by this government. Because, sir, prior to this administration, nobody was doing these things in Barbados to help the people of Barbados get through a little better. Nobody. And Mr. Speaker, sir, perhaps among the most offensive of the experiences was this thing that they call occasional licenses. Because if, sir, you were not a retailer, and if, sir, you were not a hotel, or you didn't have no restaurant, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, and you weren't say you weren't a hoteler, your only option, for example, I use the example again of Patsy in Holders Hill. I could use the example of the folks in Oystins Bay Garden, Mr. Speaker. An occasional license was necessary because that which they did had to be licensed. If you're going to sell alcohol, they all got a license. But there was no category of license to capture these micro enterprises. And why was there no category of license to capture those micro enterprises? The Parliament in 1957, sir, did not view this as something desirable. In fact, it viewed it in the exact opposite way. It was something, sir, to be rejected, not promoted and facilitated. And so, therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are again today correcting a mischief that is long rooted in long and deep history. And, sir, every single week, therefore, we have people who will leave Oyston, or leave Holders Hill, or leave Fitz Village, and go to a magistrate's court, sir, and they are going to apply for a fresh license and go through that process week after week, 52 weeks a year, sir, to get an occasional liquor license to do that which they have to do. The solution that we find in this legislation, sir, is the creation of an entertainment license. We are correcting a policy construct that, beyond being antiquated, has been a disincentive to entertainment-related business activity. But with an entertainment license, sir, now you can have a place in which you operate, and that place, Mr. Speaker, sir, is licensed properly. Gone now, hopefully forever, will be the days of people having to go and renew a license week after week after week in order to be able to earn a living honestly in the land of their birth. And Mr. Speaker, sir, this legislation that we correct has also been a disincentive to event promotion in Barbados. You know, it boggles the mind, sir. It boggles the mind how a country that has made so many millions of dollars, in fact, 34% of our country's gross domestic product in the year 2019, when I would have been tourism minister, came from tourism. 34% of the GDP. This is because how does a country that relies so heavily on tourism, and therefore by extension relies so heavily on its national festivals as part of the tourism product, the Crop Over Festival, Reggae Festival, etc., etc., Mr. Speaker, sir, how then do you have the people who give life to the entertainment within those festivals, the event promoters in particular, dealing with a serious business? How do you have them, sir, in a situation where they have to go from magistrate's district to magistrate's district for every event that they wish to put on? And let me give you an example. You, sir, I believe I've seen you at Bliss. I was going to say fire the work, but you have never fired the work, sir, so I would not say that. But you will go to a Crop Over Fair. I just gave you an example of two of them. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that you're dealing with a business. Yeah, it's a fat experience, but for the person organizing it, it is a business. And that business person, if he or she got his head screwed on properly, would want to make sure that they can do their event as often as possible because they want to raise as much money as possible during the season. So it is quite logical, therefore, that if I could do my fete or my activity 4 times in the season or 6 times in the season, well, I can do it 6 times in the season. But what would be humbugging me? You know, the main humbug, Mr. Speaker, sir? The main humbug is that if I want to have my activity and I sell in some liquor, and I want to have one on the east coast of Barbados, I got to find the magistrate's court for St. Andrew. If I want to have one, sir, on the south coast or Oistins, I got to find the magistrate's court for Oistins. If I want to have one in town, Mr. Speaker, sir, I got to go to the magistrate's court for District A. If I want to go on the west coast, Mr. Speaker, sir, I got to go to the magistrate's court down in Whole Town. And Mr. Speaker, sir, every time I go to the magistrate's court, I go back through that same laborious, long-winded, nauseating, and frustrating process that I just outlined to this honorable House a few minutes ago. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we said no, that multiple events in various locations, sir, should be facilitated, and it should not mean multiple applications to multiple magistrates in multiple jurisdictions. And therefore, sir, we create, sir, a seasonal license, and that seasonal license, sir, will be available for the sum of $500, and, sir, it lasts for 3 months maximum. For 3 months maximum. And therefore, we begin a process that is much needed in Barbados, where if you're an event promoter, sir, you have some certainty, you can do what you have to do. If you want a license for 2 weeks, take it for 2 weeks. If you want a license for 2 months, get it for 2 months. If you want a license for 2 days, get it for 2 days. You have access under the season to a license for the whole season up to the period of 3 months, Mr. Speaker. And if we think about it critically, we will understand the wisdom of the Prime Minister when she made the point. And I believe the Minister responsible for culture, the Member of Parliament for St. Philip West, the Honourable Member, sir, who has said repeatedly that this now must take us to the point where we get the one-stop shop. Yep. That you should be able not only to have your seasonal license, but every other type of permission you need so that you go to one place. Or with your seasonal license, you go to one place, and with that seasonal license, you can then generate all the other assistance that you need so that you can go about the business of advancing the economic activity that the season is there to generate. And if we do that, sir, we unleash the creative abilities of the people of Barbados. If we do that, sir, we stop this thing where people feel stymied and stifled, that they feel they have to go to old Uncle Joe and say, Uncle Joe, I want a job. And Mr. Speaker, sir, what we want to say is no. We want to say you stand on your own 2 feet, facilitate a man with the opportunity to fish. Let him feed his whole family, Mr. Speaker, sir, season after season. And Mr. Speaker, sir, not only do we do that, but we recognize the humbug that the bureaucracy associated with this has had on all levels of business. I say to you, sir, that the Chamber of Commerce and the Small Business Association and the BHTA, as I mentioned before, have had to share their views very pointedly with the ministry. Not only when we invite them to come and talk, but, Mr. Speaker, sir, when they are frustrated for years, going back 3 decades, this has been their concern. And, Mr. Speaker, we have introduced now, for the first time again, multi-year licenses, up to 3 years, so that the fee on the license reduces for every successive year. It is an incentive, therefore, for the business operator to get a license for 3 years, or even for 2 years, because in the end, they're going to spend less money than if you get our annual license. But what it does is to remove the backlog, remove the annual requirement, or yes, in this case, the annual requirement of having to go back and get a license. So it is another effort at easing the process administratively. With regard to hotels, sir, obviously, you have to factor in those smaller hotels, that group which would call themselves or be defined as the elegant hotels of Barbados. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, I said elegant, sorry, not, intimate, not elegant. Intimate. And Mr. Speaker, sir, for a 1-year license, they will pay $1,500. For a 2-year license, sir, instead of paying $3,000, they pay $2,850. And for a 3-year license, sir, instead of paying $4,500, they would pay $4,050. For the larger hotels, for example, those 100 bedrooms, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, for a 1-year license, they'd be paying $7,500. For a 2-year license, instead of paying $15,000, they pay $14,250. And for a 3-year license, instead of paying $22,500, they pay $20,250, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, the administration of this act is also vitally important. As I indicated, we are moving from the very formal structures administered in the Magistrates Court of Barbados under the superintendence of the Royal Barbados Police Force to a civic, and perhaps I should also say civil, structure. The authority which will govern this process will be the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, and the director of the authority, or the authority will be led by a person whose title will be director, and that person will be the Director of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. Clauses 4(1) through 3 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, outline what is conceptualized with regard to the structure of the authority. And if I could share that with you, Mr. Speaker, sir, it would be that the authority shall consist of a chief officer to be known as a director, and such other officers as the director and minister think necessary. The authority shall be responsible for administering the act, issuing licenses in accordance with the act, supervising licenses and the operation of licensed premises, and I'm going to come back to that, and the general enforcement of the legislation. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, there are going to be 7 classes of license, and those 7 classes, there will be several classes of license, and those several classes of license are outlined at Clause 7 of the legislation. There will be an export license, which applies where obviously liquor is going to be exported. A wholesale license, we had that before, which applies where liquor is to be sold on a wholesale basis. A retail license, which we had before, and that applies where liquor is to be sold on a retail basis, whether or not the liquor is in a sealed container. A hotel license applies where liquor is to be sold at a hotel, and I've just outlined the adjustments that we will be making with regard to the hotel license. Let me say to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we're also going to be very strict with the definitions, because the definition of the hotel is outlined in the definition section, and the reason why there has had to be that approach, so that you align now with the definition of a hotel as is found under the Barbados Tourism Product Authority Act, It's because, Mr. Speaker, sir, you know, people do a lot of fancy footwork. And there were those people who say, well, the restaurant is in the hotel, but the restaurant really is a private contractor. We've leased out the thing. It is not our restaurant. It's a private contractor doing that. So therefore, the license for the restaurant is going to be at a different price. And that obviously is a lower price than that which the hotel would pay, and therefore that's how they get around that, or had gotten around it in the past. We correct that mischief as well, Mr. Speaker, sir. And again, you know, it is important to recognize that one of the real benefits to this legislation is that we are doing a lot of general cleaning up of some of the legislative missteps that have been identified along the way. And one of the commitments, sir, that we make as a government is that wherever we find these legislative problems and deficiencies, we will move with alacrity to correct them. There's going to be, as I said, a restaurant license, and I outlined the seasonal license, which applies where liquor is to be sold at events occurring over a period not exceeding 3 months. Special occasion licenses will apply where liquor is to be sold at an event over a period not exceeding 24 hours, so that's a one-off thing. And then, Mr. Speaker, sir, you have the entertainment license, which I alluded to before, and a members club license, which is a vestige of the old piece of legislation. Now, sir, the application for the liquor licenses are made to the Liquor Licensing Authority. With regard to new applications for a retail license or an entertainment license, because, sir, obviously the retail license would be, for example, what a shopkeeper would have, and we've already outlined what an entertainment license would be about. These things may take place in a vicinity where you may have some persons who may feel themselves to be prejudiced in terms of their interests, in terms of the activity that is taking place in the immediate neighborhood where they are. Once received by the Liquor Licensing Authority, sir, the fact that there is an application for the license must be notified to the public via notice, and that will be on the ministry's website first of all, and then in any other manner that is approved by the director, and obviously on the promulgation of the legislation. And I can come to that after, because once we have passed Parliament, there still has to be a period of discussion with people so that we settle the way in which we do the promulgation of the legislation, and give people who are accustomed to one system an opportunity now to prepare themselves for the other. Notices of the concerns or objection to grant a new retail entertainment license as proposed are to be lodged with the authority in relation to the application that is made. So if, Mr. Speaker, sir, you feel that you have an interest that is prejudiced as a result of my application for a retail license, you have a right to lodge your objection with the authority, and the authority must notify the public of the objection, first of all. Secondly, it must notify the Commissioner of Police of the objection, and that must be done within a period of 3 days. So those steps must be taken within a period of 72 hours. Why are we holding the process to such tight time frames, Mr. Speaker, sir? Again, it is about business facilitation. It is about trying to make sure that we get past this perennial humbug of the thing or the process taking so long that it renders the business or puts the business in a position where it starts to suffer as a result of the administrative bureaucracy impeding it and impeding its interests. Now, if I am going to make my objection, I have a period of 7 days within which to make the objection. So the application, the fact of the application is published to the world, and I have 7 days within which to make my objection and state the grounds and the reasons why I object. Where the authority has received an objection to grant the new retail or a new entertainment license, it has to hear and determine that objection again within 7 days of receipt. The applicant for the license, sir, the Commissioner of Police, and the person objecting all have a right to appear at the hearing. And if you can't appear personally, you have the right to appear via an attorney at law acting on your behalf. So that it is not a barrier, sir, to the proceedings taking place if you can't get there Monday morning, because you are entitled to brief counsel who can appear for you. And as we well know, Mr. Speaker, sir, in these matters, you brief counsel and or a spokesperson or friend. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, where an applicant for a license other than a retail or entertainment license or a special occasion license has complied with all the requirements, the authority has to issue that license within 5 days of the application, if there is no objection arising. So that the 4 or 5 week period at minimum is now replaced, Mr. Speaker, sir, with a 5-day period at maximum. The enforcement and compliance procedures, sir, are set down in clauses 33(1) of the bill. It is important, sir, to recognize that a member of the Liquor Licensing Authority, on production of his or her identification, may at any time enter and inspect licensed premises with a view to ascertaining whether the act is being complied with or whether there are infringements of the act that are taking place. The licensees of the premises must comply, and they shall not obstruct or instruct their employees to obstruct the business of the authority. Equally, however, Mr. Speaker, sir, the members of the authority, while they are entitled to request production of the license and so on for the establishment, they have power which, if the director feels is necessary, can be exercised so that in the interest of public safety, or if there is a breach of the peace, then you can, once you have a police officer at the rank of sergeant or above signing off on it, require premises to be vacated for not in excess of 24 hours. So if there's a matter taking place and a fray arises on a premises, and you feel that it is necessary, sir, to vacate the premises in order for heads and tempers to cool, then the place can be closed down for a period not exceeding 24 hours. Under the old legislation, Mr. Speaker, sir, the solution was to lock up the shopkeeper, lock up the persons involved, or fine them, sir, in a court of law. In circumstances, sir, of complaints by residents residing within the area, then the authority, sir, has to hear the complaint and has a number of options at its disposal. It may impose conditions on the license so that if your behavior in the place of business is a matter of concern to the authority, we can put certain it can put certain conditions on the license. For example, you're not entitled to sell alcohol after whatever hour it is in the night. And equally, Mr. Speaker, sir, if the circumstances warrant, you may suspend the license, or alternatively, you may revoke the license. In any of those circumstances, however, before that action is taken, there is a requirement that the licensee have the benefit of written notice that this is what the director of the authority intends to do, and therefore gives the licensee the benefit of having a right of response. So that, Mr. Speaker, sir, what you and I have come to know and love and plead before the courts, which is that a person must have the benefit of natural justice, that right of response, od alteram partem, let both sides be heard, that is entrenched within the process. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I may still, despite the fact that I have a right of response, not like or disagree with the directives of the authority. What then do I do? The legislation empowers me, sir, to appeal to the Liquor Licensing Tribunal. And the Liquor Licensing Tribunal can hear appeals from the decisions of the authority, especially those decisions, sir, which relate to revocation or suspension of the license as a result of an infringement. And There are other matters. For example, at clause 31 of the bill, there is, for example, a very important clause which says no person shall mix or permit any liquor to be mixed with any ingredient or substance so as to render the liquor injurious to health. And no person shall sell, supply, or expose for sale any liquor referred to in paragraph A, which is the paragraph I just referred to. Now, in circumstances where that happens and the director takes action against your license for allowing that to happen, you have, sir, a right to appeal to the tribunal. And so, therefore, in a broad way, the tribunal does three things. It deals with appeals in circumstances where you have failed to comply with the conditions of your license. That's the first one. The second one is that it deals with appeals in circumstances where there has been a breach of any statutory duty or obligations imposed under this piece of legislation. And the third one, sir, where the act has been breached or there has been a failure to comply with the directives of the director. I had indicated to you before, sir, that the principles of natural justice apply at every step along the way, and therefore the director cannot act in your detriment without giving you written notice and opportunity to show cause why the action that he proposes to take should not be taken, except in the occasion where, for interest of threats to the public well-being, the place of the premises in question may be vacated for a period not exceeding 24 hours. That is the only time that the director is able to act unilaterally, so to speak. Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, the power of the tribunal is that it too can impose administrative penalties, and those administrative penalties do not exceed in any circumstance $10,000 as being the penalty. Now, if you have a grievance with the administrative penalty, then, sir, you have a further right of appeal to the High Court of Barbados on a point of law. I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, that pretty much carries me through the substance of what the bill now seeks to do. It is really, sir, as I said, a transformative, or part of the transformative agenda of government. It seeks to modernize the criminal justice legislation in this country. It seeks, sir, in part also to make sure that we do not continue, or insult, as we modernize the criminal justice legislation, let me put it that way, it seeks to make sure that we do not continue this wanton practice of treating to every infringement of a criminal nature in a manner that results in imprisonment or risk of imprisonment. And it is important. And why is it important? Those people who have spent time to study this thing, sir, make the point that, you send a person to prison, even if it is only for 3 months, there are implications, sir, not only for reputation, there are implications, sir, to that person's family, there are implications to that person's employment, implications, Mr. Speaker, sir, for that person, even in this world nowadays, for opportunity to travel abroad and secure a visa, so to do. There are some serious implications, sir, that we have to begin to take seriously with regard to this matter. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, it deals decisively with the age of drinking, which, as I say, has not been properly dealt with since we were a colony, and it has been a source of great concern to a number of child advocates in this country, as well as social advocates, and even those persons who are involved in industry, such as the insurance enterprises and so on. And Mr. Speaker, sir, last but not least, it creates a civic structure for the administration of liquor licenses in a way that has never been done before. And as we do that, we move the law out of the Victorian era in which it existed, to use the Prime Minister's term. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we bring us smack dab straight into the middle of the 21st century, where we are looking at matters of empowerment, we are looking at matters of facilitation of business, we are looking at matters of ease of access to opportunity, we are looking at matters, Mr. Speaker, sir, of equality of opportunity. And that's an important thing. because it makes no sense having a business structure in which at some level, some players have better opportunity to access the benefits that the system provides in terms of licensing and administration and so on. And then in other circumstances, you do not have that same level of opportunity. I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, that this House would do well to not only reflect on this bill, but I urge the House, sir, to give it its support, because it takes us another step, sir, in the journey of the modernization and the transformation of Barbados society and Barbados economy. And I, sir, want to commend it to your attention. With those words, sir, I beg to move that the bill be read a second time. I'm obliged.
Honourable members, Jamaica Central, South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I thought you were giving away something there. Sir, I rise to strenuously support the bill that is before this House. Now, you know, there are some people who focus very much on doing, and there's some people that focus very much on talking about what they will do. I'm pleased to be able to associate myself, sir, with a Barbados Labour Party government that perhaps has focused so much on the doing that we have not quite done all of the work of talking about what we've done. And it is not to congratulate ourselves, but it is based on a simple principle, sir, and that is the principle of accountability. Accountability is something in which I believe very much. I think there has to be a way and there has to be a system by which you say what you hope to achieve, what you commit to achieve in the name of the people who have asked you to help govern. But then you also have to show that you've done it. And the best evidence for showing that you have done it is people's experience of it. Because, you know, often you find that if you have to protest too much that you've done something, it means that people are not feeling it. They're not experiencing it. Someone said to me a couple days ago, stopped me on the street and said, "Ma'am, you know that I was able to get my police certificate of character in 2 hours?" Now, sir, I don't really care for congratulations or accolades or any of that. But what really shows me that we in here doing something, that we are in cabinet doing something, is when somebody is able to say, this is the way in which this has impacted my life. Sir, we talk a lot about the doing business agenda, and sometimes it sounds like fanciful language, right? Sometimes it sounds like you have a matrix, you have a table, and it has in a bunch of targets, and those targets have a bunch of indicators, and you have all these different things that you're trying to get done, and at the end you get a score. Sir, we are not in here because we're trying to get a score. Those things are important because they create the investment narrative for a country. So your ranking is important. Your score is important. But I'll tell you one of the first things I said to my colleagues when I was asked to convene and work with colleagues in the ministry on this Doing Business Subcommittee of Cabinet and on this Doing Business Private Sector Committee. I said, we thank the World Bank and our partners for coming up with this reform note and telling us what we should do in order to improve these scores. But the people of St. Michael's South Central did not send me here just to do what an external agency has asked to do. The people of St. Michael's South Central sent me here to help make their lives easier so that whether it appears in a report or not, if it is something that is aggravating them, we have a responsibility to analyze it and address it. And so while we took, and we are taking, as part of the work of the Doing Business Subcommittee of Cabinet, which will meet again before the end of the month to again take stock of where we are, and we will be so happy to be able to reflect and report with the will of this chamber, this legislation being passed, this chamber and the other place. But not only did we take the things that were outlined in that report, but we also had to have a conversation with ourselves to ask, what is it that people are really experiencing? And somebody in one of those meetings said, you know, we could talk about how easy it is to get electricity when you set up a business or when you build a new brick and mortar business. But have we talked about how easy it is to get water, as in the water connection? And it wasn't in any report. But we had to sit down and have an honest conversation with ourselves about what are the things that are really humbugging Barbadians on the ground every day. And that was one of them. And so it wasn't in anybody's report, the issue of water connectivity. But we had a conversation with the then Minister of Water Resources, who agreed with us that it was something that we should monitor, because we realized that at the time, it was taking too long for new businesses, for new buildings to get their water connection and so to be able to operate. So it isn't just about what comes up in a report. It is about what are the material ways in which we can make people's lives better. The honorable member who introduced this bill in this chamber this morning said something in his opening remarks that are, for me, something that is, for me, at the foundation of why I believe we are all here. And it is that, you know, we talk a lot about foreign direct investment. Foreign investment is important. Being able to match foreign investment and capital with local ideas is, for me, even more important. But the reason that we concern ourselves with all of this ease of doing business work is not just, and I would dare say not primarily, to be able to facilitate big business. Because here's the thing. Larger companies tend to have the wherewithal, the resources, the time, and the energy to navigate complex systems. They're able to hire lawyers, and they're able to hire people to simply just to go and do the busy work. But a man who is trying to run a shop, a woman who is starting a painting business, as one of my constituents just advised me that she was doing. She's a painter. She's establishing herself as a painter so she can hire other people and grow a company. Those people have fewer resources to run all about the place and to try and navigate systems that are too complicated. And so the real value in being able to do this work and deliver on something like a new liquor license bill that is going to simplify things is to be able to give clarity and predictability to regular Barbadians, to people who live and work here, to people from Carrington Village and Flagstaff and Clapham and Britons Hill and Flint Hall. That is the magic in it. Yes, we know that by doing this work, by doing all of the doing business work, by doing all of these reforms, we're going to attract more investment from external sources. But having shown that the kind of growth that we need to see in this economy is growth that is driven by the small business sector, growth that is driven by startups and by people who, if they start a company, they're going to start to hire the people in the gap with them or the people the gap over that they know looking for work, that they know have the capacity, and our economy is going to grow in that way. That is the purpose of what we have come here to do. And so, what really thrills me, sir, is to be a part of a team, to be part of a government that can look honestly at what exists and listen honestly to what people are experiencing. And say, listen, the people that we know are at a disadvantage in the current system. The people that we know don't have the wherewithal to do all these fancy things that we're asking them to do. But I'll tell you something else. You know, we very glibly say that time is money. But it is absolutely true. And the fact is that those among us who have fewer resources in terms of money also have less time. They also have less time. You will find that people with fewer resources, people with not a lot of money, people who don't work for a lot of money, spend more time trying to provide for their families, whether it is being on a bus trying to get their children to school and they're on the bus with the children. If the bus comes late, that is less time that they have to put into productive activity that is going to get them money. Whether it is having to go and line up in a court system to get a payment from what we call the non-custodial parent, so the parent who's not necessarily living in the household, to the custodial parent, to go and line up somewhere to see if money put on. That takes time. And when somebody is doing that, they're not doing all kinds of other things that could in fact be earning them money. You see the perversity of it, sir? And that is why the National Digital ID that is also being introduced and is being rolled out in the next couple of weeks, the re-registration of the population, that is also a part of our doing business agenda, is so important because it has the capacity to be able to facilitate those kinds of payment transfers, state legislated or state ordained transfers between individuals, so that people don't have to go and line up somewhere. So that those people who would normally be going and lining up could now have more hours of work, or could now be spending time writing applications for the next job that they want, or doing one of the thousands of Coursera courses through the National Transformation Initiative to be able to improve their chances of earning a higher income. This is what we want. Sir, this is an ecosystem of opportunity that we're creating. It is an ecosystem of opportunity because the time that is saved, because you can now apply online for a passport or a police certificate of character or a liquor license means that you can now put that time into so many other productive things that you once did not have the opportunity to do. I know, sir, that this bill is going to make a tremendous difference for so many people in our communities. The honorable member who introduced the bill spoke earlier about the culture sector and about the numbers of young people who are promoters, for whom the culture of Barbados is so critical, not just to be able to earn, but there is a group of young people for whom our spooge and our calypso and our heritage, our tuck band and our pan, and all the things, our tradition of storytelling, all the things that make us enjoy being Barbadian and being Caribbean. They're not just doing this work to earn, and it is important to be able to earn as you do it, but they also take such pleasure in being able to bring their creative pursuits and the results of their creative pursuits to the people of Barbados. And to be able to plan events and to be able to execute events without, quite frankly, sir, feeling persecuted. Because there used to be a climate, and the honorable member made reference to it, in this country, where it was almost as if you wanted to hold a fete, you were up to no good. And the kind of marginalization, and perhaps I take it personally, because anybody who knows me well knows that summer is my favorite time of year for two reasons, sir. It's crop over and it's mango season. And those two things happily collide. But I believe in the experience of that part of our culture, not just because people might like to party, but because historically, that represents for us a freedom and a creativity that absolutely should not be repressed, suppressed among people who want to realize their creative talents. And so this legislation, sir, creates a whole new set of possibilities for a whole new set of people. I remember, sir, that there was a party that started many years ago. A handful of young men who started out in a little gap, I don't want to call the name, who started out in a little gap, and even though I don't indulge in that particular pursuit, because I don't eat meat, but they started roasting a pig. And it was a lime, sir. And you would know well what I'm talking about. It was a lime, a handful of fellas get together on a particular night and roast a whole pig on a spit. And the unbeliever of government business, and we wouldn't partake, but it attracted a certain energy. And it started out very small, 20 people, 40 people. Eventually it got to 100 people. And then the thing mushroomed. And they started hiring other people and started going to having their parties in other countries, in Trinidad and St. Lucia and all over the place. My mother has a habit of saying, when you hear the shout, and sometimes my mother's colloquialisms creep in, but when you hear the shout, they're at Kensington Oval because nowhere else in Barbados could hold them. And you know why these youngsters and their enterprise, their initiative was so important to me? Because they started doing it because they, as young people, did not want to lose their handle on the things that make us Barbadian. There's a group of young people who are so desperately holding on to make sure that those parts of our culture do not disappear, that we have to be able to facilitate their creative pursuits. And I'm very happy that this bill is able to do that. Now, when in June 2018, we did start this reform work with the planning legislation. And sir, I will tell you, because I only know how to shoot straight, I will tell you that none of this has been easy. Because you're talking in many cases about the fundamental ways in which people expect to engage with government, and then the fundamental ways in which the government expects to engage with people. These are things that, as you work on the legislative changes, as you work on the regulatory changes, these are things that you have to work the entire country through. And so it is a process. But again, I am always happy to be able to hear from people who say, I was able to get my day nursery established because of how much easier it was to have a conversation about what was required for me to get the planning through. When we said that we were going to have a predisposition to yes, that planning, just like every other government regulatory agency, was not there to say no, but to say how. Not there, sir, to say no, but to say how can this be done. Now, the way that you bring it to us might not be the way that we can take it, but the commitment that I have made and the commitment that this government has made is that we will always look honestly at what is presented to us and tell you, well, this one can't fly, but according to the legislation, if you frame it in this way, this can fly, and we want to facilitate you being able to do this. And the reason that young woman and her day nursery were so important to me was that not just because it's an opportunity for economic enfranchisement, it was. But I'll tell you why else it's important. When the children in those communities have a daycare center, then their parents are going to work. Their parents are going to work feeling comfortable that their children are in a safe place, and they are going to be productive. And that's why I talk about an ecosystem of opportunity, because these things do not exist in isolation. But it is a work in progress. And I think that when we come to this honorable place or we go anywhere else and we talk about what we have been able to do or what we are able to do, it is not to say that we are reforming everything at once. I wish we could do it all at once. We are doing several things at once, but not all things. Because regrettably, we found several things that needed to be fixed. And we started the work of fixing them. And so there are times when the people of Barbados will experience a service in a way that they don't want to experience in it, and in a way in which we certainly don't want them to experience it. And what we do in those circumstances is to be able to deconstruct what is the reason that this thing is such a nuisance. A friend of mine who works in another country says that in his work they established something called a nuisance committee, which is the same thing. What are all of the nuisances of doing business that people experience, and how can we get rid of them? That's all we're doing here. Irritants. But you see, there can be more than nuisances and irritants. they can actually really fundamentally erode a person's capacity to enjoy their lives in a productive way. They can remove opportunities. And so while for us it may seem like it is just a long line, the reason we need to get rid of that long line, and we're committed to getting rid of those lines, is because they remove opportunity from people's lives. But sir, what I do want to say is that the work that we have to do, the work that we are doing across every single ministry and department in this government is the work of looking at what is the purpose of this thing? Why do we do it? What do we do it for? And it's a simple four-question system that we apply to policy making. What is the public purpose? What is the public mischief that we're trying to avoid? How does technology add value to this? How does technology help us to do this more easily? And the fourth and final question, which is my favorite question, are there any groups of people that would be disadvantaged by this measure? Or are there any groups of people for whom this measure provides us an opportunity to create a chance at further economic enfranchisement? Four simple questions, and I'll tell you, sir, that business of deconstructing the things that we do and looking at what is the first principles approach. Let's go step by step, and I'll tell you, sir, that I walked into town planning office, and I was only sorry that I didn't have an application. I not in that position, sir, where I could apply to build anything at the moment. But I went in, and the team will tell you that I walked straight through the process. From the fact that at the time there were only 2 chairs, so that if more than 2 people are there in the lobby, well, people have to stand. And then I asked, so if I here for a little while and I want some water, where to get water from? It might seem very simple, but that is the deconstruction, sir, in which we are engaged. Put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's walking into that office. I go to the front desk. I go left, I go right. That lady over there, what's she dealing with? I don't see a sign. That lady over here, I don't know. Somebody please direct me, because when you don't direct me, that's time that I late to pick up my child from school. That is an extra hour I got paid a day in nursery. That is money that I don't have. And so this is the simple process, sir. It's not anything that any big fancy analytical frameworks. That's not what's required here. That's not the work that was done by the member for St. George South and now the member for St. James Central. It was a simple work of listening to people, talking to stakeholders, going through the process, and removing the extra nonsense that was making people's lives difficult. Sir, 2 final thoughts I want to share before I take my seat. One is that we do have work to do. Completing this reform agenda, it is so thorough, it is so deep and broad and wide. And that's why every ministry is engaged in it at the same time, for all of the regulatory issues. But I'm going to say something that might be slightly controversial. I know to do it from time to time, so why stop now? And it is that, you know how I will know, sir, that I have seen some measure of success in what I've tried to do in service to the people of St. Michael, South Central, and Barbados. I will know that we've seen some measure of success when the need is removed for people to call me and say, see what you could do, I ain't get through. It is perhaps something that we don't like to say, and it's perhaps something that we don't like to confront. But when people do not feel so disempowered and disenfranchised and excluded that they think that the only way they can get through is if they call somebody that they feel can help them, that's when we have work to do. And so I will feel, and I can only speak, sir, for myself, I will feel that I have reached some measure of success when the systems work. When the systems work. And when they do not depend on the benevolence of somebody sitting down behind a desk. When they are sufficiently transparent, sufficiently predictable, sufficiently simplicity is what makes people's lives easier. That people do not feel, I am not going to get through unless I make a call. That people can go with confidence to any office wearing the clothes that they have, and it's not to say that people don't make the effort to be what we would call decent. But don't tell me that all I have is a pair of jeans that got in 1 or 2 holes and a shirt without sleeves. And you tell me that I can't come in and ask for help, so how am I going to get help then? If I can't wear the clothes that I have to go and ask for help, how am I going to get help, sir? If you want to tell me that I have an earring, I am a man, I have an earring, sir, as small as a speck, take it out and put it in your pocket before you come in here. How we get so aloof in doing the people's business? So, sir, I will know that we've seen some measure of success when we prioritize the outcomes for people over the form and the pomp and the nonsense. The last thing I want to say, sir, is that, this work requires partnership. And one of the reasons that I will always tout, sometimes the conversations are difficult, but life is about difficult conversations. But I will always tout the success of the governance system of the social partnership because it allowed us to be able to do so many difficult things without having to be disagreeable, to sometimes disagree without having to be disagreeable. It allowed us to use the solidarity principle and to apply solidarity to a lot of what we had to do. One of those things is the national payment system, sir. Now, the national payment system is something that we passed and that we were able to conceptualize along with the banking system, knowing full well that in fact what it does is it loosens in many ways the grip that banks had on the payments in this country to be able to democratize it so that anybody with a payment technology, a new technology that met certain criteria, could participate. The purpose for that is to be able to reduce the costs of payments. That's the purpose. That's how we will know that it is succeeding. But we were able to do that along with the banks. We had to, because there was no way, just like the honorable member for St. James Central had to partner with Light and Power to be able to democratize the energy space. These are partnerships that we have to engage in. And so the last thing I want to say is that the government of Barbados is driving the legislative, the regulatory reforms. But in order for us to deliver real transformation to people, we have to do it in partnership with everyone. We have to do it in partnership with the telecommunications companies, with the other utility companies, with the banking sector, with the schools, with everybody who is a stakeholder in this transformation. And so this work is a process. And there are going to be times when we have to pause and we have to listen to what is not working, and we commit to do that, to listen to what is not working, to deconstruct the process, and to make the changes. But I am proud today, sir, to be able to lend my voice to this debate for this piece of transformational legislation that is going to make such a difference in the lives of so many. And with those words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the sitting be suspended until 1:45 p.m.
The question is that this honorable chairman be suspended until 1:45 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chairman stands suspended until 1:45 p.m.